Okay, yeah, I'm here.
Great, welcome. Now
Well,
it's a formal welcome.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and really, happy to host you finally. We wanted to start with this,
Yeah,
but then we postponed it. So for the audience, so Vashin was one of the person where we actually started envisioning this series together, and now it's a reality. And Vashin, congratulations for the release of the white paper that got released yesterday. The
yeah,
focused intervention for white paper post COVID-19 by the TIFAC. For the audience, TIFAC is the Technology Information Forecasting and Assessment Council, an autonomous body of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. I was reading that report, and this is a fantastic one. So it's a really it's a lot of hard work I can see, and especially by the work SAPU has done with the other stakeholders like scientists from the TIFAC and the Department of Science and Technology and the others. And really happy to see that SAPU has been instrumental in the policy recommendations.
yeah. Thank you for that.
For the audience, a quick intro from for Ashin. Ashin is an IIT Bombay alumnus. He is the CEO and the founder of the Sapio Analytics. He is also a government advisor and global investor. He is also the regional mentor of Change Niti Aayog, and that's how me and Ashin actually came across to each other. I think a lot of credit goes to our aim.
That's true.
Right. Ashin, you also have started a great work on the DSS. Definitely, I will ask a great question, some questions related to this. But it will be great if you share a few words about you. That will be really great. Definitely, DSS, I will be asking separately. So, overall, you can give some brief about you for the audience.
Okay, sure. So, uh, so I have been an entrepreneur all my life, and as an entrepreneur, what I have always tried to do is to create impact. That's the reason why I am an entrepreneur, and I think what we are doing right now with Sapio and with my other companies and everything as well, the idea is to create impact, to change lives. And this is yeah. So this is what I have been doing for quite some time. I have been fortunate enough to have some really good exits in the past, and then become a venture capitalist, and then now doing this with an amazing team. So an entrepreneur is never never successful without an amazing team. At the end of the day, the team is what who does the real work. So yeah, so I have been fortunate enough to have a great team in all the work which I have been doing.
Great. No, you have a fantastic team. At least last 2 3 months, I have been interacting with them. Hardik, Ripal, even the interns and all. Brilliant team.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me put a note of thanks to our supporters for these: NMIMS, IIT Kharagpur, Radcliffe Life Science, and the European Medical Association, International Association of Medical Basic and Social Scientists, Dronalaya, and UPCO, a PSU set up by Government of UP. Ashin, before we actually go ahead with the white paper related question, as I mentioned that I would definitely ask about the DSS,
Yeah.
right? Uh, so how you came across the DSS, if you can give me, because this is a fantastic work. This is an outstanding out of the box work you have been doing, right? Getting the different levels of experts, including the Nobel laureate, is not a joke.
Yeah. So I'll tell you. So, Sapio has been focused on providing data-driven advisory to the government since the past 2 years now. We have been focused on that. We have been doing some really great work. And then at the start of March, we realized something major is happening. The world is changing around us. I think that realization was so clear that that we need to act on this now, because the whole situation being created by COVID-19 is not just something which will come and go away. It's going to remain for a very long time, and this is the time when decisions will become even tough to take. It will become even more complex. And that's when we decided, okay, what we have been doing with respect to data driven decision support systems need to now also focus on COVID and the situation around it. And that's how we decided to kind of expand our team and start getting as you mentioned, lots of experts on board as well. So since we were doing something which was extremely unique, and since we have already been doing some work with various governments, we immediately got lots of experts who joined us and became part of the team. So that's how it became. That's how everyone got together. For example, I will share with you since you mentioned about the kind of people who have been involved with us. So, for example, when we were talking about, let's say, impact on the bottom of the pyramid. So, for that, we have got Mrs. Ela Bhatt, who is a Padma Bhushan, or I think a Padma Vibhushan, and she's a legend. She's an icon, and she gave us lots of inputs on how to work on that. So, that is the kind of people who joined us together to be able to create what we have created. And today, all the recommendations which we see in the DSS, the decision support system which we have, coming from the minds of global leaders. So this is how we got this created.
Great. A lot of credit goes to you, of course, Hardik also, because bringing them on board is a tremendous job, I can tell you. Great. I'll move towards my question, which is related to this white paper.
Yeah.
This is a brilliant paper. This is actually the policy-related document with a very structured approach since I read the paper. But unfortunately, as you know, and as you are closely watching, everybody is a policymaker nowadays. And the best policy discussion happen while having the tea in the evening.
Yeah.
Whether it's the sports strategy or the GDP strategy, everybody talks, what government should do and what should not.
Yeah.
Right. This is an unfortunate story. Now, since you were seeing the work very closely, it will be great if you can give some kind of brief outline that will be quite helpful for the audience side. Because when we say about the policy changes, what do we actually mean?
Yeah.
Because the challenge, I will tell you, because I have personally discussed with a couple of people about the policy. Everybody says the policy needs to be changed. The moment you go to the micro, what people are clueless. Because then people are clueless. Yeah.
No, it's good to have people generally involved in suggesting policies. There's nothing wrong in that. As Indians, for example, even in cricket matches, all of us suggest how the player should play. That's totally fine. It's a part of the process. What we mean by policy change, it can be anything. It can be something, let's say, talking about the kind of financial boost a particular sector needs, or the kind of, let's say, the import rate which a particular item needs to have, or the clusters which need to be formed for a particular sector. So it can be anything across the entire spectrum. And that is basically a process which needs to be driven through, according to us, what we believe, through lot of analytics. So when you talk about policy change, so policy change is not something which should be done through intuition or through discussions over, as you mentioned, a cup of tea and snacks. It's good to have thoughts coming through these methods, but at the end of the day, it has to be driven scientifically. It's a scientific exercise. Policy making is a scientific exercise, and that's what we have been doing. And thankfully, with us, the governments that we advise have also been following such a scientific process.
So yeah. Do you see that the probably 5 years 5 years down the line versus 5 years back, how the trend is changing, right? How data is being used.
Yeah. So I'll tell you something. I totally believe, for example, people are talking about changes because of the current situation, right? They're talking about the new world getting formed. So correct. One thing which people talk about is, let's say work from home becoming a new normal, right? That is one example. Same way, policy making will now follow data. It has to, because the complexity behind taking decisions is now out there. With the situation which has come to all of us, it became so complicated to take a decision. Nothing was clear what is happening. So where do you fall back on? How do you take any decision? How do you decide whether or not this area needs to be closed, whether it needs to be opened, or what kind of, let's say, even decision of opening the liquor shops? Every single decision is extremely complex. The complication of that came out to the fore, and that's where the realization came in that decisions cannot be taken just by few brains coming together and trying to solve it. It has to be driven scientifically through data, and steadily for 5 years from now, for sure you will see it. We are seeing this in the US. We are seeing this in various other developed countries. So definitely it will be seen in India in a big way.
Great. But in that same aspect, there are multiple layers, because few experts are working on the policy level, few experts are working from the outside who is trying to support like DSS and all, right? There are other people, the bureaucratic people, who are also involved to understand those things, right? Then it goes for the then the implementation challenges. It's a whole lot of big gamut.
It is.
So how complex it is?
It is extremely complex. For example, I was discussing this with someone yesterday, someone very senior in the UP government, and he told me that that consultants till now they have been doing one thing, creating a paper. Okay, he told this very clearly, and these papers come out, and then nothing really happens. Okay, so he was very clear on that part. But this will change now. If the paper itself talks about the implementation and says that the policies which are being suggested cannot be suggested unless the feedback of what is happening on ground is collected, then it's quite natural that feedback will need to be collected. There has to be a process of implementation. So right. the entire, the whole idea is that the work should not stop at creation of policies. The work begins there. It needs to go into multiple levels of execution and collection of what is happening in terms of feedback from such execution. And then based on that, recommend policies and keep on improving policies at a regular interval. So that understanding is very critical. And this understanding of this being so complex is also very critical. And as I mentioned, when things are extremely complex, technology solves it. Tech solves it, right?
You're right.
If this understanding has come in that, okay, tech will solve this complication, then things will become easier. Then actually work will start happening more on the implementation side as well.
Sure. So we'll definitely go on the tech side, but we'll start with the basic requirements. So जो भी है खाने को तो पड़ेगा. So food is our basic requirement. There's no escape. Whether it's an Ambani or the poor people, that is a basic requirement, right? Now, if I talk about the sector, that's agriculture and food processing, it impacts everybody, all startup people. So where do you see the policy level changes required post COVID-19, and how government can ensure that the changes get implemented smoothly? Because as you rightly said, because अगर हम लोगों को paper ही release करनी है, then it will go for in the library. देखने में अच्छा लगेगा, but काम किसी को नहीं आएगा.
बिल्कुल. See, I'll tell you something. I'll take this question. I'll briefly talk about something about the paper as well.
Sure. That will be great.
Yeah. So this paper, we worked on it from the start. So it is not something which has been worked upon in the last 1 month. We worked right at the start when the whole COVID-19 situation came in. This got prepared by the end of April, and then you can see May mentioned in the paper.
Yes.
In May, it started getting circulated across various departments in the government of India. Niti Aayog, PMO. So it actually has been liked and seen by the PM and PMO and other departments in the government of India. And then it got released to the public yesterday. So the reason why I mentioned this to you, to give you the context, is because it shows that, when we are approaching this paper, we are very clear that it has to not just become a paper given to all the, policy makers. It is something which the policy makers have already got a buy-in in. They already know that, okay, this is something which needs to be done. And a large amount of the policies which will come to in some time, you will see what you are seeing right now to some extent seems influenced by the thoughts in the paper as well. So, that is the whole idea behind this. Now, coming specifically to the point of agriculture and food. So, if you see in the paper, we have talked about a large number of things. I'll not get into each one of them. But one of the things which we have talked about is let's say precision farming. Okay, that's an example. Precision farming is an example which we have talked about. We have talked about how the entire supply chain can be changed with the food, because the interesting part with food is that we know how much of food gets wasted on one side. We know that on a global level, there was some data which talks about around 30% of the food getting wasted, and we also know the amount of people who are devoid of food, people who are who remain hungry. So there's such a gap, which means there is clearly something wrong. There's clearly something wrong in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the work which can be done on how the food reaches out to the people. And that is something which needs to be driven on a policy level. So if you see, we have talked about policies which can help in the supply chain getting better. Food actually reaching the people and avoiding the processes in the middle as much as possible. We have also talked about precision farming, which is an amazing concept in itself. So there are, and the whole idea behind these policies is that, let's say when we apply, how will we, let's say, promote precision farming? Then there will be a lot of plans around it, incentives around it, which will help in the application and the implementation of the precision farming part as well. So it will, paper is one thing, then the implementation starts happening, and the people who will be benefiting from this implementation will actually benefit in a way that it will be recorded. It will all be, it mentions in the paper as well that, when we do precision farming and start making policies around it, it needs to start getting recorded so that further actions can be taken. So as you mentioned rightly, it should not stop at policy level. It needs to go to the level of implementation as well.
Great. In fact, there was some brilliant mention in the policy side that, how technology like blockchain, IoT, and the AI can be used in this agriculture and food processing. It has been recommended, and that is brilliant. If you can give some context that how it can actually, because if that happens, data with this kind of technology with the policy level changes, I think we are on the right track.
Yeah. Let me tell you, smart farming, like the way we are talking about smart cities right now. Correct. Smart city came out of certain policies which were created. Same way, smart farming is also a clear need. 56% of India today depends directly on agriculture. It's such an important sector today that it cannot be just ignored. So if you're talking about smart cities, similarly, smart farming needs to be talked about, right? And when I say smart farming, precision farming is one of the examples over there. When we do smart farming, it requires data. It requires AI. For example, knowing in what land, what kind of produce needs to happen at what time, in what manner, is something which comes out of data, and that data gets collected from the satellite. It gets collected from the sensors, which means IoT is getting involved, right? And together it's able to tell you things. Now, if this is enabled through policies, by providing the right amount of, because obviously it requires an initial capital expenditure. If that is, initially incentivized, this can begin. Smart farming can become more and more common in India, and it will clearly lead to a significant change.
Great. In fact, when I was going through the report, so you all have actually, taken all the pillars of the society in a beautiful way and narrowed down the kind of challenges and the recommendation.
Yeah.
What I liked about the way you guys have mentioned the MSME sector, right? The small and medium. So right now, if I talk about, it's everybody is talking about the cash flow challenge.
Yeah.
Everybody is saying, हाँ शायद एक महीने में मेरा खत्म हो जाएगा, 2 महीने में खत्म हो जाएगा. Nobody is in a happy phase. Salary deduction have started. Somebody is talking about deferment. Somebody is talking about cut, but it's almost hit across. So what do you see, what kind of recommendation you all are suggesting? It will be some great insight from the audience point of view, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who are also working in this sector, and they are also hit by the cash flow.
Yeah. So this is, honestly, this is one of those challenges which is very tough to solve.
Right.
And whatever we will say here right now, people will say, okay, कहना तो आसान है.
Correct.
But the reality is, because we can talk about the loans which are coming out, and the plannings which I'll talk about the recommendations which we have given as well. So one of the recommendations is around clustering, for example, creation of clusters. When we say clusters, it's not just physical clusters, it's virtual clusters as well. So we have talked about how there should be an entire plan about what kind of MSMEs exist across different regions. And around that, there should be clear plans on how different types of clustering can be done. Now, this clustering is like something which can, like a cooperative, organization. Think of it that way, where there will be help for MSMEs from each other as well. It is needed. It is needed today that this clustering can solve a number of such problems. So how to make such clusters is again what we always say, data-driven policy making thing. That you can actually decide how to make those clusters. But we have talked about this very clearly. That clusters need to be formed, and that's how the entire design needs to be made for MSMEs. It will not solve the cash flow problem right away. We all know this, right? For the immediate 1 month cash flow problem, honestly, there is no clear answer apart from the loans which need to be taken, which the government has already announced and talked about. Right, that's the way to move ahead. But it's not just the problem for next 1 month; it's a problem for the next few months. And this is something which we have talked about, trying to solve this through intelligent, smart, again, the word smart is used again, smart clusters of MSMEs that can be formed. I'll also give a quick example if you allow me.
Sure, sure, please.
So one example I would talk about in the electronics, in the electronics sector, you will see, we have talked about something. We have talked about how, how India's electronics industry is so much dependent on raw materials from outside. Okay, which is understandable. That's how it has been for some time. The number of ICs, semiconductors manufactured in India is almost zero. And all the products which we make depends on ICs. Right? There's nothing, electronics does not exist without it. So just imagine the gap. And we have talked about it. So we have talked about such a major gap existing, and it needs to be solved now. We cannot even think about Atmanirbhar Bharat without solving the problem of semiconductors. As simple as that. Because without that, nothing can happen. Right? And the reason why India does not have semiconductors, properly, there is not an industry of manufacturing of semiconductors, because it's not easy to manufacture. It requires a lot of water. It's a process in itself. The setup is very tough. The initial capital expenditure is high. So we have talked about how this is a gap, and businesses need to start getting into this thing and start solving that gap, and policies will be made to help this gap get reduced. The right amount of technological interventions as well as financial interventions will be given as per the paper to basically, reduce this problem. So now that happens, so it will not solve the problem in the next 2 months, but it will solve the problem, let's say 8 months from now, 10 months from now. Companies that are starving may starve tomorrow, will not starve because of this problem. Because of the solution which will be given to this problem. So this is an example. So similarly, there are a number of such suggestions which can be given to MSMEs, where they can diversify into, where they can change what they are doing right now to start doing something which is more needed, which is more suitable for the current context. And this also needs to come through the policies being suggested by the government. Right? For example, if there's a policy tomorrow around semiconductors, then it will be because it's needed. And MSMEs need to think, okay, now it's needed, that's why we need to start. And since there are policies around it and more incentives around it, let's get into this. So this is one aspect of the paper as well. One has to think both short-term as well as long-term in any policy making which needs to be made.
On the same note, how do you see the PPP model in future?
It's happening, right? It's happening more. Railways privatization is happening. It's a big thing. Just for the example of railways, we are working on something called dynamic pricing of the railways. Okay, which will be very similar to how it's priced in the airlines, for example. And this concept itself can, according to some of our calculations, can increase the profits of railways by around 15 to 20%. This simple concept. So by bringing in privatization, now it will become almost mandatory to do this, because you cannot survive without this, because there will be private players doing it. The same thing, in the ways we see in airlines today.
Right.
Yes. So by bringing in players, we probably propel the use of new age technologies and ensure that it gets faster. So it's a good thing in that sense.
Great. In fact, after that, you have also mentioned about the public health system. There are certain policy level recommendations, but this is a talk of the town right now. So we are talking about this PPE challenge and all, and everybody is in tremendous pressure, right from the technician to the doctors.
Yeah.
What are kind of your recommendation that the government need to focus?
Yeah. So one of the things, again, there are lots of recommendations, but one of the things which we have talked about, again, related to technology, I would say, is the idea of the focus on, let's say, the virtual aspect of the public health system, creation of that virtual element. Now, for a long time, things have been in limbo. Let's say around telemedicine. Limbo in the sense, no, gray area, not clear what really needs to be done. But it is here now. It has to happen now. If the public health system if the pressure on that has to be removed, it can be removed only when the places from which the pressure is coming in, if it does not need to come, then it should not come. And that can only happen if that is automated. If that entire process, we bring in tech to ensure virtual consultations as well. So that is one example, and those policies will be needed to make the entire public health system again, overcome the pressure which is out there. Pressure has to be removed, and there is a lot of pressure of people who kind of put pressure just because there is no availability of doing something virtually.
Great. In terms of the Atmanirbhar and all you already was talking about, so I'll go slightly in the deeper. The global relation dynamics with India, post this China incident and all, that is going to be one of the major, or probably one of the key factor which will define how India will behave in, or probably where India will reach in India 2.0.
Yeah.
So a couple of other episodes also you were talking about how India can actually utilize this opportunity. From your side, since you are already working with the SMEs, you are working with different institutions, working with the policy level, it will be great to have some understanding that how India can become a powerhouse. And when I'm saying powerhouse, not only as an external kind of, from the other countries, as India is fantastic, but also India to be a true Atmanirbhar in its true sense.
Yeah. So I'll tell you something interesting here. So basically, in the entire plan, as you see in the paper as well, this whole challenge opportunity thing comes very, like, lots of the times. We talk about it in every sector, that these are the challenges being brought in by COVID-19 situation and the pre-COVID and the post-COVID world. Right. And these are the opportunities created for India because of this. It very clearly mentions in all of the sectors challenges, opportunities. Dr. Harshvardhan also in his initial prologue talks about challenge opportunity. Everyone talks about challenge opportunity. This entire paper, there is a significant philosophy behind this, that this challenge is an opportunity, and the PM also has talked about it. So challenge opportunity is interesting to talk about. In terms of making Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's not just about that everything gets produced in India and only India consumes it and it's all India. It has to be that India becomes the center point for what is happening outside India. For example, it becomes the center which can supply things outside India as well. Now, where does the opportunity come in? There are lots of places that we talk about it in detail, but I'll give you one of the major points.
Sure.
So, what we have been talking about, data. So, India today has got so much of data out there, which is getting produced. So, India has been the consumer nation for a long time, right? Be it, we all know China's TikTok, they're wanting to come to India, and then, the entire, because India is the consumer nation, or any global company, Google, Facebook, the number of users in India produce so much of data that it can be used for so many calculations also. It can be used to know and improve the product, which the international, lots of global organizations are working on. Paper mentions about this briefly also, that this is an opportunity for India. India is rich in data, and data is something which the world needs. So why not start, making India the center of data in a way, like the way 10, 15 years ago, rather more than that, India became the center of IT and started providing those basic IT services to the rest of the world. Same way, data services is something which can be provided to the rest of the world. This point is mentioned very briefly in the paper because it requires lot of other discussions also around it. But this is an interesting example and one way to look at it as to how, we can actually convert this into an opportunity. We actually can do this. Being an entrepreneur, I always think that way. Every challenge is an opportunity, right? So it can actually be made into an opportunity if you look at the assets which India actually has, and one of the biggest assets is data, which is being targeted and looked upon by people from outside India, and that's where the money comes in for India as well.
On the same aspect, since you were talking about the data, I think one of the very nice segment I was reading about the cyber security in India post COVID-19. We had a fantastic session with Brijesh ji also, right? and you have been instrumental in talking about that, use of data on the policing. We also had a talk with Rami ji, about this UK and all. How do you see about this data, the cyber security, and all of the Indian context, global context? How things can go?
So, elaborating more on this policing part, the law enforcement part, or any other part related to this. See, I mean, it's happening whether we want this or not, right? It is needed. Decisions with respect to security of the country, with respect to law enforcement, with respect to intelligence, information, everything cannot be taken without use of data. It's as simple as that. The way, let's say many years ago, fighter jets was critical for defense of the country or something like that, right? It became very important in any war. We've seen the importance of that since the World War II, in Europe and all. Today, without data, there is no army. There is nothing. So data is extremely critical in law enforcement, in intelligence, in every aspect of that. So, in terms of answering your question, yes, it is going to be used in a big way. We are obviously working towards it.
On the same line, since you are already working as an entrepreneur, you are also working with this Atal Innovation Mission, right? Atal Innovation is doing fantastic, but you also know how it started. We also faced a lot of structural challenges, and this regional concept came, and things are much more smoother. Still, there are a lot of teething problems. And obviously, Atal Innovation Mission have not covered each and every schools, the kind of volume of the kind of schools we have. Unless and until schools and the colleges and these innovative minds are coming together, things cannot move ahead.
True.
Right. So in terms of incubation and support, because right now the problem is that there are a lot of innovative ideas which are coming to the school kids, but they don't know how to go ahead.
Yeah.
They don't know where to approach, right? So वो बचपन में होगा ठीक है पढ़ाई करो चुपचाप और जॉब पे चले जाओ. So मोटा मोटी concept यही है. Till the time somebody reaches to IIT or the big colleges where people actually evaluate. What kind of structural changes or the educational policy changes you envision for this?
So one thing you already mentioned, Atal Innovation Mission is a major step forward, and it needs to be taken forward in a much bigger way. It needs to be made. Let's say, since you mentioned about policy changes, so I have been also recommending it to the policymakers for Atal Innovation Mission to make some of these things which are under Atal Innovation Mission as much mainstream as possible. Mainstream, when it becomes more and more mainstream, right now still, as we all know, there is a separate concept which works in parallel to the mainstream education. And the way the teachers also work is that, okay, this is the mainstream education and this is the Atal Innovation learning.
Correct.
Two different things.
Absolutely, I agree.
Bad example, but like the way the movie world
is happening.
Yeah, the parallel and the mainstream have now merged, or at least merging. Same way for Atal Innovation Mission also. It's important that this merge happens, and it can be driven through policies. Once that merge happens, then more schools will automatically fall into the whole concept of Innovation Mission. And as both of us know very well, the concept is to ensure that students start thinking innovatively. The idea of innovation, the seed of innovation needs to come right at the start. For example, when they read a chapter on physics, they think of how whatever they are reading can be used in practical life, right? Just example, and when I used to do sessions with the students, I used to talk about how when they do, let's say, even they are dancing or whatever, playing cricket, they should always keep on thinking about what they have learned in the school, right? So this is the whole idea that the innovation mindset needs to be built, and innovation mindset building should become mainstream.
But still, somewhere there is a lot of disconnect between the school system, how things are happening, versus college or probably some higher education system is happening. Vis-a-vis how is the actual VCs and people are actually working. Yeah. There are so many talks are happening, but unfortunately, when the entrepreneurs are coming, they can't even read a balance sheet.
Yeah,
they ask for, we need this much of amount. The moment you ask why you, so that when we talk about the justifiable, they don't know how to have those kind of micro level calculation.
Yeah.
So do you feel that somewhere the mainstream education, the financial literacy, this kind of the whether it's a study or the learning, that should be a part of the mainstream education?
Yeah, yeah. That's the whole idea. That whatever is practical, and as you mentioned rightly, and what is practical also keeps on changing somewhat based on the situation. So one thing which I always believe in is that things should be flexible. It should not be as if, okay, this is something which we have been learning since the past 20 years. It should be new topics, new thoughts need to keep on coming in, and some old ones need to go as well. And that's how it works. Whatever is going, and honestly, there too, there should be thought of what is not just happening now, but what is going to happen in some time, because the students who will learn something in class 5, 10, 15 years from now, that will be something which will be implemented in the practical job world. So you need to think of the future as well. That's another thing. And I always say to the mentors also, that should not just focus on the learning which is happening, right now. Okay, right now AI is hot. That it is hot, that's true. But now again, if we teach only AI, then you see something else. It's our job to have the vision of what will at least some vision of what the future will be, and make the plans of what needs to be mainstream now, depending on that vision, as much as possible.
Great. So I'm just coming to the now mainstream of our discussions. Slightly we both carried away about this incubation and all.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about this China episode. We all know, or probably we would love to have an overnight stop of everything, but we all know the practical reality, the way all the countries are dependent based on the cheap labor or the electronics or the manufacturing. It's overnight stopping is absolutely not possible. You can stop the application overnight, but you cannot stop the importing and the others. It's absolutely not possible. Keeping aside all the emotions, right? But of course, there are certain changes you guys are thinking in terms of the policy level and all. How India can attract the more investors and India can become a global hub. And now to do that, of course, what was happening, and if still India is not a global manufacturing hub, kahin na kahin kuch to loopholes hai. Let's accept the fact. So what should we work forward? What is the recommendation?
Yeah. So paper may also we talk about China +1 policy.
Correct.
Over there. So we talk about very clearly that Atmanirbhar Bharat is not something which is achieved by by making China is equal to 0. No, it is achieved by making China +1, which means, for example, as I mentioned, the entire electronics industry will go away. If the integrated circuits, semiconductors is not, there is no, discussion with China on that. So there has to be proper plan around this. Something needs to be created before, changing and removing something else. So yes, China +1 policy is something which we have recommended. We need to be very much aware, which means basically that certain raw materials come from China for the time being. Then we keep on looking for replacements wherever it is possible, and then kind of create backups and mechanisms to replace it in due time. So that's the only way it can work. And we talked at the start, it's complicated. If we try to simplify it into something like, okay, let's stop everything and today, and then that's not how it works. It's complicated, and anything which is complicated has to be driven scientifically. And this is something which we believe in. We try to bring in as much as possible within the the policy framework as well. But yes, it should be driven scientifically, which means how much of China needs to be replaced, in what manner, in what areas, in what parts of India. Everything has to be driven by scientific data-driven decisions. Okay, that this area and this particular sector, this particular raw material needs to keep on coming for this much time. It has to be driven to that level of precision. Then only it can be made into a plan. Otherwise things go completely crazy. It does not work that way.
Absolutely. Before I move to the next question, for the audience, you can start writing the question in the chat section. We'll try to pick up and cover as much as we can.
Yeah, and you can also involve the audience as well, right? They can also probably give some of their suggestions.
Absolutely.
Not just, I think that will be great.
So the audience, you can write, the chat section is open, so me and Ashwin both can see, and we'll try to pick up, and we always try to cover as much as possible.
Yeah.
Now let me move to the next part, whether we'll be talking about the bottom of the pyramid. When I'm talking about the bottom of the pyramid, it's the underprivileged area of the society,
Okay.
right? And they are largely affected. So we are talking about policy level changes, but unless and until they have cash, unless and until they are getting the shift in the better way, or probably as soon as they can, nothing is going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is the kind of recommendation? Because हम लोगों ने MSME की बात किया है, but bottom of the pyramid is something right from Abhijit Banerjee to everybody is talking about.
Yeah. So I'll say 2 points here. One thing is that, we have seen one thing which even the paper talks about is automation, right?
Yes.
It talks about how various processes can be made automated, and which is very much needed today, because certain processes are stopped today because of the lack of labor, which needs to be automated so that it can happen. So if we automate, the question comes in, okay, we are saying that the labor was there, it has moved out and gone back to some other place, and that work can be automated. So are we saying we don't need that labor anymore, that that workforce anymore? The answer to that is that, again, policies cannot be seen in isolation. If we are making this policy of automation, there has to be another policy, which thankfully we are working on right now, is around skilling. And this has been talked about for a very long time. So people have talked about skilling, that okay, workforce need to be skilled. But again, it needs to be done in a different manner now. It needs to be done in a manner where an unskilled worker becomes a skilled worker just by knowing, for example, an unskilled worker may be working, let's say a person who works on tiling within the construction site, who works on putting those tiles. Okay, so that's tiled work, as we call in the construction segment. Now that person is identified as an unskilled worker. Okay, but there is a skill behind planning how the tiles need to be put. Now, if we are able to use that iota of skill, that element of skill which is there, which is involved in an unskilled activity, and plug it with some amount of learning, maybe a 2-week crash course on certain skill which kind of matches this particular activity, and convert this into a skilled worker, the need suddenly is fulfilled in a much better way. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need to have a very intelligent tool that can do mapping of skills in a manner which, again, I repeat, this sounds repetitive, but again, driven by data. So there is this entire platform that we are working on right now, which I believe we briefly talked about in one of the earlier sessions as well, where the entire skill mapping is getting created for entire India. And when I say entire India, obviously focused on the bottom of the pyramid, as you mentioned, where we will know, okay, these are unskilled workers, and this is the level of skill which they have, while being an unskilled worker, and this is the kind of skill gap which exists, and this is the kind of training which can be provided so that they fit in this kind of scenario. So this kind of very smart mapping is what India needs right now, and I'm very happy that we have been able to start work on this with support from the government.
Great, and that is going to be probably a benchmark work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm waiting for this work to start and then move ahead, because this can literally change. Because all the work which we are doing may be impacting, let's say, 5 to 10% of the nation, right? Here, the impact is on 90%, which is, as you mentioned, oft ignored as well. But this 90% is what will decide the economy of the country in future.
So if I talk about the skill and unskill, end of the day, this is coming under the workforce.
Yeah.
So how do you see the workforce management post COVID-19? Whether it's in Ministry of Labor or something, there are a lot of talks are going on. Yeah. Whether it's in work from home, part of policy level changes, IT companies are also recommending certain stuffs. But somewhere still there are a lot of ambiguities going on whenever we are speaking to different people.
Yeah. So in general, I think the ambiguity remains. I don't think policies can come into this particular thing and solve the ambiguity. This ambiguity has to be solved by the business world of the country, the business side of the country, the India Inc., what we call. And as you know that I also have this company which focuses on consultancy of companies primarily. So I can see very clearly what is happening right now in many of these businesses. There is a lot of ambiguity on how the workforce needs to be planned. People are so confused. Sometimes they're announcing, and I'm seeing strange things happening. They're announcing salary cuts, then they are making it mandatory, then some are making it voluntary, but voluntary in a way that it is actually mandatory. And all those things are happening. It's already started happening, and then basically again pulling it back, whatever policy they had made. So there's a lot of confusion right now in this entire scenario. I don't think anyone else can solve it, but the entrepreneurs themselves can solve it, the business themselves can solve it, and they have to figure it out, the new world, as soon as possible. One part of the new world, which you already mentioned, is allowing work from home wherever possible. All those things obviously will become the new normal. Wherever it is possible, it will be done in that manner. So these are some of the changes happening. Yes.
So this is something, ये तो मतलब जबरदस्ती हो गया. मतलब if I talk about the Indian managers mentality, work from home earlier before COVID होता ही नहीं है. It's work from home becomes work for home.
Yeah.
But now people are saying, oh, if that is something, other things are not happening, it actually works, right? So it's a forced change I can see.
Yeah. So
technology is one of the kind of tool that is being used. But on the same way, technology can also be used in multiple ways. One of the example, if I give you from the report, that how technology can be used on the granular level, right? From district level to the top level, whether it's in BPL, all the other part, how things can be more transparent and all, right? In fact, Modi ji started this account and direct bank transfer. There are a lot of technological intervention is happening. But where do you see other tech-related changes, or probably certain policy level changes or thought process related changes, which should be a part of India 2.0?
I think it will be, just drawing upon the point which you mentioned at the start. This is a very, very common joke on LinkedIn, so you must have read it already. People are, so there was this, someone asked the CEO of a company, what is it that led to the digital disruption in your company, the digital revolution in your company? Is it the CEO? Is it the CTO? Is it the CDO? Or is it COVID-19? So the answer is COVID-19.
COVID-19.
So basically, it has been something which has been forced. So that is without a doubt. That digital revolution which everyone is talking about was not happening. Everyone was very slow in, okay, we will adopt digital, we'll make things, virtual. We'll do it in time, let it happen. But now suddenly it's happening. It's here. Everyone is talking about it. So it is kind of forced. Same thing is also true for the automation in the, whatever work with respect to the government related policies as well. Same thing is true, that all of these things which were not getting adopted. For example, there's a very large number of MSMEs which we know who are unregistered, right? Who form the backbone of the country's economy without being even recorded as an MSME officially.
Right.
Such a big number. Now, the situation in which India is right now, and it's a dire situation, no one can deny that part. It cannot come out of this situation without actually bringing these MSMEs more into the fold. It has to be brought, because all the policies which we'll make, let's say, if they are not actually impacting the people who are kind of, playing such an important role in changing the economy, how will the economy change, right? So it's needed that they come and become mainstream. How will they become mainstream so fast? Through automation, through tech. No other option out there. There has to be tech. There has to be tech which can, let's say, something be as basic as accounting tech, which can bring them, okay, now the accounting is getting more digital. Something as simple as that. But it should start with tech, and they need to be brought into the mainstream.
Great. I can see audience have started putting their question in the chat section. One question we have already received. We are almost 9 minutes away from the 1 hour deadline. Of course, we can extend a bit, but it will be great if the audience, if you can just start, probably finishing the questions, we can pick up. So Vikrant is asking, how do you see AI transforming a common Indian in next 10 years? And he has actually put common Indian in a double inverted comma, which I like it.
Who is common Indian according to Vikrant?
So we'll talk offline on it. And what are the areas in AI current generation should focus on from an Indian context? And how do you see people developing these skills as a must-have skill again double inverted comma, then I can have skill, double inverted comma.
Yeah.
Lot of meanings are from this question.
Yeah. So I think I'm getting where Vikrant is coming from. It has been that AI is a skill which is no maybe coming there. It's almost there. It's not something which is part of let's say not as important as web development. Let's say from a tech perspective, but it is changing. It is changing. I mean, honestly, as I mentioned, when policies will be made by AI or recommended by AI at least, then you can see the kind of change which AI has brought in. It is how mainstream it has become. Definitely, it is going to become a must-have skill. Now, how do you see people developing these skills once it becomes mainstream and must-have? Then everyone will do it. They will all start. Lots of courses have already come in, and tomorrow, naturally, these courses will not tomorrow. It will take time. It will become part of college curriculum as well. It's natural, if something becomes must-have. So honestly, to answer Vikrant's question, it has already become must-have. It's just that like it happens with the light years, with the stars. We see the actual impact or no the trend when it has already become a trend. We don't see the trend at the start of it, and that's why some of us are not able to see it yet. But it is already a must-have skill. If you think otherwise, then you are falling behind in the whole AI race. So for sure, it is a must-have. And in terms of how do we see AI transforming a common Indian in the next 10 years? So uh, I think what will happen is that we will start doing things. The common Indian will start doing things which actually requires brain. I mean, so this is something. Let me tell you from the perspective. Now, this is not fit in Indian context, but there's a company called Automation Anywhere, and one of its CXOs was talking to me recently, and she told a very interesting thing. She told that Automation Anywhere, basically the whole concept is that they automate everything. They've got lots of RPAs and all, and she told that at least in US, driving is something which does not really require brain, but people give time to it, right? Because it becomes so much, it can be. So her point was that there are lots of activities. So that's why she was talking about self-driving cars coming in, at least in US. The point is there are lots of activities which can actually, be done by an AI system, which does not really require human beings. So that in 10 years, we will see the common Indian actually doing things which human beings are meant to do, which means apply their brain. Honestly, there are lots of things which we do right now where there is no brain application and we just do it because there is no AI.
In fact, I would like to quote one sentence on the same context. There is a brilliant sentence in the report itself.
Okay.
There's a lot of meaning in it. The current pandemic is global, but the solutions to the challenge should be local.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant sentence, right? If I talk about the challenge and if I go by the same logic on the granular, the local start from me.
Yeah.
So if I can upgrade, I can think about how I can go for and contribute into India 2.0, things will be possible.
Exactly. True. So true.
Great. My last question, because I think there is only one question what I can see. No, I think one more question I have got. We have suggested China plus one strategy for MSME, and few days back, JSW Group announced to reduce to zero import in next 2 years. What is the role of big industrialist in Atmanirbhar Bharat? Kunal Ojha is typing this question.
Okay. So, I mean, the answer is obvious. We know how much of the, again, economy is controlled from the big industrialists. So, definitely they play a significant role in deciding what Atmanirbhar would be. One thing which is very important is that they alone cannot make India Atmanirbhar Bharat. What Amitabh, you were saying right now is the local part, which means MSMEs, which means that individual entrepreneur. Everyone has to play a role there, and then only it can happen, because sometimes it can backfire also. And we'll be very honest. Let's say a big industry decides to change things suddenly, and it does not fit in the large number of MSMEs which are dependent on that big industrialist. Things can go haywire for them. For example, let's say someone is supplying a product which comes from China and then uses it. No, you never know. There is a lot of complicated supply chain out there. Correct. So it should not be. It should be only if the entire country is able to do it together, and it has to include the MSMEs and those unregistered MSMEs also, the unorganized sector as well, as much as possible.
Great. So there is no more questions. The two questions we had, and we have already told.
If anyone wants to give their comments, they can. I mean, right?
Yeah.
If anyone wants to actually share their thoughts, because I think one idea of these sessions is learning for everyone.
Absolutely.
And I should not be the only person giving learning. It should be coming from everyone. But
now your talk has inspired one more mind. So, which sector is more important to be focused in India for becoming an Atmanirbhar Bharat? Is it a research and development, or is it the manufacturing sector?
Okay. So, this question is by Saras. Saras, do have a look at the paper. It talks very clearly about
the brilliant paper. Yeah.
Five sectors which we have identified, which are very critical. And you will see manufacturing in there. You will not see R&D in there. You know why you will not see R&D? Because R&D is part of every sector. It's not a sector in itself. Right. If you see the sector and then you see the plan of that sector, you will see R&D becoming a very critical part. Everywhere we have talked about how R&D is important. Let's say in the pharma sector, how India can become the hub of R&D. When I talked about the data part, actually I was even mentioning R&D in a way. Why can pharmas in India do better R&D than other countries? Because of the large population which India has. I mean, let's be honest about this. There are lots of other things. So R&D is a critical element in all the sectors.
This is like, you were talking about how AIM is different than the mainstream education. The innovation has to be part of all the subject, but unfortunately it's two separate things. We'll go to the same thread where, we both relate to the question for the students, as this session is also going to be recorded, as you know, and we are also sharing with the schools. How students can contribute, because students are already bringing a lot of ideas and mentors are already trying their best, and you are also supporting in the best possible way. So some of the ideas, it might be some sanitation, it might be something related to AI, it might be a lot of things. And since you are working in this policy side, you'll be finding a lot of scope.
Yeah.
So some of the ideas, I'm sure it can be brilliant from the student side.
Yeah. So actually, if I talk about ideas, there are thousands of them. Honestly, but let me try and let me tell you something very interesting. So I don't know how much of let's say the students are aware of this who would be listening to this, that the concept of deep learning, we all know about what deep learning is. We are all not heard of this word deep learning. It sounds very exciting also, deep learning. This entire concept got created out of one competition which was getting held, which was on image processing. So basically what happened in the process of image processing, in doing image processing, some of the developers, they realized that, okay, there is something called deep learning, which means the system can go into some totally, not just machine learning where it is learning on its own, but it's actually learning, thinking on its own completely, and I am not even doing anything. So the idea being that, this is what happens out of innovative thinking, and that's what the students in AIM is supposed to do. They are supposed to do innovative thinking. Now, obviously, I cannot expect the students of class 10th, 11th, and 12th, or even earlier to start working on deep learning. But maybe one of the projects which they can start thinking of is something similar with which deep learning started, which is image processing. So now, let's say they see things around them, and if they can start understanding how a system would identify an image. Our human being, like the human eyes can identify an image in a particular manner. How does a system see an image? Let's say they see a cat and dog. How will a system know whether it's a cat or a dog? Something very simple. If they start off by simple image processing, and I love the beauty of what image processing can do. It's the basis of a lot of machine learning and AI which we talk about today. So if they start with something basic around it, plan and see how certain images are getting identified by a simple program which they are able to make, that will be a great start to their learning for AI. And once they do that, all these things become a very important part of a bigger project as well. So one thing also which I would like to add here to the students is that it's not about trying to solve, okay, let me solve what the law enforcement wants to solve right away. It is built up of thousands of smaller things, which kind of creates the bigger thing. So let us try to solve those smaller things, and it will become part of the much bigger solution for everyone. And image processing related work is something which I think a student in their class 10, 11 can still do and still be able to create something which is really magical, because the power of that is magical, according to me.
Great. Lieutenant Colonel Sunil Narula, they had a kind of query. So like we know all CSRs, and CSR is a compulsory, and we all talk about 2%. I'm not talking about how it's getting distributed, because half of the people don't even understand what is CSR. But here's a very valid point, that don't you think it's time to make CDR, CRDR, that is a compulsory contribution, corporate research and development responsibility?
Yeah.
From the policy point of view.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion from his side. Obviously, I mean, we can discuss and debate on the way to do this, but the suggestion is great. That yes, CRDR is something which can be like CSR is there. This is extremely critical. R&D is what decides again the future of the country. So yes, I think that's a great idea.
I think we can actually, have a one dedicated session on this, where we can actually call a couple of experts and we can actually do something. I'm just taking a thread from Narulaji.
This is actually a very good idea. We can actually call people from the corporate as well as government.
Correct. We can actually have a brainstorming session on this strategic part. Narulaji, thank you. Thanks for this great idea. So we have almost covered everything as of now, and thank you, Ashwin, for your valuable insight and time. And it's immensely helpful in this critical time. And I personally hope that you enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah, always, always good talking to you.
Thank you, and immensely helpful for the students and the Atal Innovation Mission mentors also, because we have also covered that side as well. For the audience, we try to cover all the questions, and we'll be notifying you all about the upcoming session. Ashwin may become part of some upcoming session as well with the other stalwarts. Stay tuned and stay at home. Don't take unnecessary risk. Be safe. Keep learning. This is something we have been focusing a lot. And see you all soon. Thank you all for the timings on the Saturday. And I guess only the people who are joining, they are the one who typically likes to learn.
Amitabh, I have a new statement called "Stay safe, stay happy. Home is incidental."
Great. So Narulaji, we'll talk offline. The suggestion that you gave, we can actually materialize that in a great way.
Yeah, with great difficulty in my very big corporate, where I am the senior advisor for business strategy innovation, I have convinced the management, and we will very soon will allocate a separate fund for my division, R&D division. And the core technologies I'm going to, whichever we are dependent on China and all these, funny creatures around Asia, we are trying to focus on that, the niche areas. So we don't have any dependency on China and these.
Fantastic.
So we already have a IIT Mumbai Center for, wind energy sponsored by Suzlon. And that's how we'll be approaching other IITs wherever the core competency we find is good. Just Ashwin, point for you to ponder. Thank you.
Thank you. We had one question. Saksam, probably we'll be taking the question in other kind of episode where we'll be having other times, because slightly we are late. It's already 6 and you have posted late.
Yeah,
I think
sorry to interrupt. I think Hardik will also probably share the paper with others, or how are we doing it, Hardik? Can we share the link of the paper with others? I don't know.
Yes, we can. I'll share the link.
Okay.
Sure. I think thank you all. Thanks for the time, and do read the paper. I personally, after this release, I was actually reading through it, and twice I read it. It was so interesting and engrossing. A lot of points, lot of insight, lot of hard work I can see. And thank you, Ashwin. Keep contributing in India 2.0.
Thank you, Amitabh.
Thank you.
For help, of course. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah. Bye.